Can an African nation finally conquer the World Cup? That's the question that people are asking in the run-up to the 2026 finals in North America. It was Pele who said this, I think it was about 30 years ago now, said an African nation will win the World Cup. We're still waiting for that to happen. Tolu, an expanded tournament of 48 teams. That means the most African teams ever in the World Cup. 10 will be representing the continent. Can any of those 10 make it to the final and do the outright win and make the continent proud?
I really hope they can, but I don't think it's going to happen at this World Cup. I like the look of the African teams at this World Cup, though. I think it's probably unthinkable that 10 teams qualify from the African continent to the World Cup and you don't find the Super Eagles of Nigeria or the Indomitable Lions of Cameroon, who are two of the teams who've done particularly well at previous World Cups for Africa. But I think the name that probably trumps out at everyone will be Morocco because of the way they performed at the previous World Cup. And they do seem to have gotten pretty better over time. But the problem now is everyone seems to know about Morocco now. I think at the last World Cup, they had the element of surprise a bit. Teams didn't particularly prepare for them. You probably just played them and just felt your strengths would probably overpower theirs. But now I think you need to have a plan to play them. They've got some of the best players in the world. I think Achraf Hakimi on his day is probably one of the best fullbacks in world football. They also got the young man from Real Madrid, Brahim Diaz, who's also been playing pretty well this year. But the problem for Morocco will be there's a bit of infighting in there. There's talk in local press about the manager maybe leading the team as far as they can get. Remember, despite all the heroics at the World Cup, they haven't particularly dominated the African continent. Depending on what the Court of Arbitration for Sports says around who's won the AFCON, we don't really know whether they've won the AFCON or Senegal have won the AFCON at the moment. But I think the World Cup, I think it'll be very, very surprising if they believe their own hype and show up at this World Cup thinking that they can just show up and then produce that kind of performance. Because look, the last time they did play well at the World Cup, the performance wasn't particularly based on them playing amazing football. It was more of a very, very organized team. The work ethic was amazing. And I think what happens with teams like Morocco is once you start to believe your own hype, you probably start to maybe change the system a bit and try to be a little bit more expressive. And that might not work for them. I still think they'll be decent at the World Cup. I think they're good enough to get out of the group stage. But I don't think they probably go as far as they went the last time out. The other African teams in there, I don't think the Ghanaians is so great. They've sacked their manager, Otto Addo. They brought in Carlos Queiroz, who is a very experienced manager as far as the World Cup is concerned and football is concerned. But look, he isn't particularly going to do he isn't going to take over a hugely talented Ghanaian team. There's still a team in sort of transition, still trying to convince some international players to play for Ghana. Antoine Semenyo is the only one who probably screams out at you. Jordan Ayew also still plays for Ghana. Mohamed Kudus still touch and go about whether or not he'll be fit for the World Cup. Hasn't played for Tottenham Hotspur in the longest time. I don't think he'll play for them for the rest of this season. And then there's Mohamed Salah and the Egyptian team. Obviously, Salah isn't the same Salah we've known over the years, and the Egyptians don't particularly do well in international tournaments. Last time they were at the FIFA World Cup, they didn't get past the first round, and that was prime Salah. So you also have to you're not too confident about them. The Algerians also, decent team on their day, but again, always seem to almost falter when they get to the world stage. There's the South Africans in there who, look, they're a very, very good team. They play together. We saw what Mamelodi Sundowns did at the Club World Cup. So they can maybe put a few runs together. But again, they're not world beaters. You don't think they're going to go to the World Cup and make a splurge. I think the one team that everyone outside of the African continent is probably standing up to watch is a team that we're not sure whether they're still African champion. Senegal, I think they're the ones with the biggest chance at this FIFA World Cup. I think they've supremely gifted team. They've got players who are not just, they might not be the top players at their clubs, but they're playing games, they're regulars, and they put in the shift. I saw them in the friendly against England where it's just a friendly at the end of the day, but they did play really well and won the game against England. That was, I think, Thomas Tuchel's first defeat as England manager at the time. And they've got a very decent team. Look, Sadio Mane is still in there. This will be his last appearance for Senegal at this World Cup. They've got the young man from Crystal Palace, Sarr. They've got talent all over the team. There's also the centre back at Chelsea, another Sarr, who's also got a breakthrough season at Chelsea this year. So I think of all the teams from the African continent who might make a real statement, I think Senegal, have a chance. You look at Ivory Coast, Democratic Republic of Congo and Tunisia. I think they're almost same of the same. I think they get to the World Cup, maybe have one good performance, but ultimately will fall short. The DRC are still trying to convince a lot of players across the world to play for them. So particularly know which DRC team is going to show up at the World Cup just yet. Of course, Cape Verde, very small island nation, they will be at the World Cup. If it wasn't 10 teams playing at the World Cup, Cape Verde wouldn't be there, I can assure you. But I think at the end of the day, you probably have to look at Morocco and Senegal, and I think I'd probably tilt more towards Senegal. And look, I think if Senegal have a good World Cup, they probably will get to the quarterfinals, and I think that's it. I don't think any of the African teams on this occasion can back up that famous quote from Pele about 30 years ago when he said, there is a point where African team will win the World Cup. That year, I don't think it's this year.
Okay, so if this is not going to be the year, what would be your best value bet? There's got to be value somewhere within this continent. Obviously, 10 nations taking part. It might be a team to get out of the group stage. It might be a team to get to the last 8 or something. So if you're thinking, okay, well, I want to try and find some value from African nation, where do you think it's best placed?
The groups are not so great. I think Ghana can't get a group where they've got England in there. I think I probably would go Senegal and Morocco to get out of the groups. I don't think that has a lot of value, especially for Morocco. But I think the last 8, depending on how the draw goes, I think I would probably tilt towards Senegal performing the best of the African teams. And I say I'd probably tip Senegal and go Senegal last 8.
Well, the African teams are always a fantastic subplot in the World Cup. The debutants, Cape Verde, can they do anything, even a point out of their 3 group games? Will they just enjoy being part of the party?
I think they'll enjoy being part of the party. They did really well in qualifying, to be honest. They qualified in a group that had Cameroon, so that tells you that they're a really good team. But African football has there's lots of specialities around African football that doesn't come to play when you play outside of the African continent. Look, pitches where you play the African qualifiers are not the best. You really have to acclimatize to that. Technically, some of the lesser teams in Africa aren't the best. So when you've got a bit of organization, you probably can get around games in qualifying and you get your acts together and put a bit of form together. You can get, I think that's what happened to Cape Verde. They've got a bit of organization, got a really good coach, and they put a run together at the right time. So they did enough to get into because Cameroon didn't play so bad. I think Cameroon lost 1 game in that qualifying series, and it was to Cape Verde, and that was enough for them not to qualify for the World Cup. I think Cape Verde, the fans are really colorful. You see them at the World Cup, but I think that's as good as it'll get. You'll be happy to see the fans, but the team, not so much.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for them and the other 9 African nations at the World Cup. Tolu, great insight as always, and I'll speak to you next time.
Thank you very much, Dan.